In this video, I want to talk about the most common questions that are asked in billing interviews and help you plan strong answers to these that will help you be successful at your interview. So, one of the questions that we see very often in these sort of interviews are questions around what would you do if you made a mistake? So, for example, what would you do if you sent out a bill for the wrong amount? So, say the bill was supposed to be 11,000, but because of fat fingers pressing an extra zero, you sent out a bill for 110,000. Well, that's going to be a problem, and they want to know that you deal with it in the right way. So the first thing you say is that in every single case, you'll always follow the company's policies. So make sure you're clear about you're always going to stick to the company's policy. You're not going to make up your own policy. You're going to do the right thing. Then you make it clear that you will always act with integrity. So just say that in this situation, I would always act with integrity. If I made a mistake, then I need to own up to that mistake immediately and put it right. The next thing you do is you say that you would record the issue to ensure that there is a clear record of that in line with the company's policy. You would then raise it with your line management or someone else in the company who is the appropriate person to raise this with, because they probably want to be informed that this has happened so they can support in solving it. The next thing you do is you say that it's very important in this situation to maintain a positive relationship with the client. And if you deal with it quickly and get it sorted in the right way, that's going to help maintain a positive client relationship. So that's how you answer the question. The key is that you're sticking to the company's policies, you're doing everything above board, and you're acting with integrity, and that is what they want to hear. The next question they could ask about is, what is your most significant weakness? And this is one you don't want to try and make up on the spot, because if you try and make up one, it's not going to be a great answer. So be ready with one weakness in case they ask about it in your interview. So let's look at how you choose your weakness and how you answer this question. So the first thing you have to do is pick a weakness that is real. You don't want to pick fake weaknesses or nonsense weaknesses. They will go down badly, and I'll show you some examples of things you shouldn't say. The next thing you want to do is do something to actually fix it. It's not enough to just say, I have this weakness. You want to actually say what you could do to overcome it and how this weakness is going to decrease over time. But most importantly, pick one that is irrelevant to billing. You don't want to choose any weakness that actually is important to the job. So some unacceptable answers would be, I don't have any, because that suggests you can't reflect or you're trying to hide something, and it really does not look good that you don't even know yourself. The next one is something like, I'm a total perfectionist. That's not going to be taken seriously. Saying things like, computers or something that's actually important to the job is not going to go down well. Or anything that is actually on the job advert. So look at the person specification or the original job advert, and anything that's on the list of things they're looking for, don't say those, because when they're interviewing you, they're probably assessing you against the list of things that they want. And if you say you're not one of the things they want, that's going to go down badly. Some potential ones you could choose from is public speaking. If the idea of standing on stage with hundreds of people is terrifying to you and you wouldn't want to do it, that's fine. Probably not going to do that very often as a billing specialist, go up and present to hundreds of people. If you only speak English and you're applying to a company where the business is only conducted in English and they don't have a large client base where they contact in a non-English language, and the job specification and the person they're looking for, they're not asking for any other languages, that is a potential answer. Just be careful about that. The next one is delegation. If you're not in a management role, you're probably not going to be delegating as much. So you could potentially use that as something you want to work on. Or if you tend to work all the time and you want to improve your work-life balance, that is another one that you could use. When you come to answer it, here's a simple way of doing it. So you say, a weakness that I've identified is, tell them what your weakness is, but then spend a lot more time on what you're doing about it. Don't talk about the weakness in great detail and explain how it's going to make you terrible at your job and ruin everything. Be very concise. Say what your weakness is, move on. And then move straight on to, in order to address this weakness, I plan to. What are you going to do to get over the weakness? What things could you learn? What things do you need to develop? And how are you going to do that? And just explain some things that you could do over the next 1 to 2 years that would help overcome this weakness. Spend more time talking about what you're doing to develop and get better than what your problem is, and you will ace this question. The next one I want you to prepare for is how do you manage a high workload? Or sometimes in billing, they'll ask about how do you manage the very busy month end period or the periods in billing where things get really busy. And the good news is that this is very easy to answer if you've prepared for it and if you say the things that they want to hear. So the first thing you always say at the beginning is that you know and you prepare for the pinch points. So you know when billing gets very busy, and you are always looking ahead to those times to make sure that you're well prepared for them so that the workload never gets out of control. The next thing you say is that you've got short, medium, and long term planning. So you know what you've got to do right now. You know what you need to be working on in the medium term, so within 1 week, where you need to be to keep on track. And then you're looking long term to say, well, in a few weeks, this is coming up, and I need this, this, and this ready so that when this part comes up, I'm prepared for it. So talk about short, medium, and long term planning. The next thing you do is you say that you need efficient and effective workflow. That's a good phrase to use. So you need to have systems in place that ensure that it's not chaos when you get to the month end period, that the work has been planned out over the course of the month to distribute the workload. So there's not periods where you're doing nothing, and there's not periods where it's completely crazy. The periods where it's a little bit quieter, you're doing some preparation to take off some of the pressure at the busy times. The next thing you say is that it's very important to prioritize, knowing exactly what the most important things are, because sometimes when you have a high workload, you might be spending time on tasks that are not important and don't add any benefit. So you need to get rid of those tasks. And one way you can do that is you can use an Eisenhower matrix. And I would look that up, make sure you're familiar with it, and you could talk about that as a technique for prioritizing because it is quite effective. The next one you say to round off your answer is that you have a very strong work ethic and you have very good productivity. So you can manage a high workload because you do work very hard and you are very efficient and effective at what you do. And so by talking through this, you'll convince them that you're going to be a good employee and you're going to get things done. So let's move on and look at another question. They could ask you in the interview, when could you start? And that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to offer you the job. That may be on their list of questions to ask everyone. And what they're really looking for is they want an answer that matches what they've got in mind. So if they want someone to start immediately, they want someone immediately. And they're asking this to find out if you can start immediately. They may have, for example, someone who is in the job that you're applying for who's not leaving for a few weeks and you're going to be taking over their role. So they might not want you to start until a few weeks later because then they're paying two people at the same time. So you want to have an answer that covers what they want to hear. So really there's two main options. The first option is to say, I would be available to start at your earliest convenience. So I can start when you want me to start. So that's basically satisfying what they want. Second option, if you're already in a job and you might be more constrained, is to say I would be available to start immediately after completing my notice period, which is, tell them what your notice period is. If you do have to relocate, so moving to another city, you can use a variation on option 2 to answer that. And you don't want to stay too long, but you want to give a range. Don't tell them an exact number, but give a reasonable range that typically would be up to about a month. That's when you start having problems. If you start talking about 3-4 months, that's probably not going to meet their needs. And if you give a range, then if they are looking for sooner, they might be interested at the beginning of your range. If they're looking for later, then they might be interested in the end of your range. So a range is a good one if you can't use either of these two options. So the next one to look at is what knowledge and experience do you have with Excel or spreadsheets? So if the company uses Excel or uses spreadsheets, which is very common, they want to see some knowledge. If you've got other questions coming up around how you use software or programs, like they might ask, what experience do you have with billing software? You can use a variation of this answer and you can see the structure of how you answer any question about how do you use this software. So for Excel, There's things that you should know and you should be confident talking about in the interview. If any of these are not familiar, I would spend some time learning these if you know your company's going to be using Excel. So you can say things like, the standard functions, formatting, you can create spreadsheets, you can use formulae, you can filter data. Pivot tables are incredibly useful. If you invest some time learning how to use them, it will revolutionize your use of Excel. VLOOKUP, incredibly useful. And if you're going to be involved in doing reconciliation, so checking that everything adds up, that's another great skill. Some top tips of things that you can say in your interview is have some examples of projects or previous experience. Think about when you've used Excel or the software in the past and tell them what you did with it. You could take a course. So, for example, if you're not so familiar with Excel, you can do a free course from Microsoft that make it. There's got video tutorials. That's worth investing some time in. So if anything on the left-hand side you're not familiar with, just have a look at some videos on it and learn how to do it, have a little practice, and then you can say you can do it in your interview, and it makes you look better. The best thing you can do is if you're looking to move into a job and maybe you're unemployed at the minute, or you're looking to gain skills, a good thing to do is get certified. Invest in an Excel training course and get a certificate so you can wave that at employers and say, not only do I think I can do Excel, I actually have someone else who's given me a certificate that said you can do these things. So it's good evidence. Let's plan a really good answer. So this can be adapted for any question they might ask about billing software or Excel or Word or anything that is software related. You just put in the specifics of that software. So what you say is proficiency in Excel is an essential skill for a billing specialist when data is stored in Excel. So if the company uses Excel, it's important to be able to use it. Then what you say is I am proficient and confident in the fundamentals of Excel, including, and the key thing here is that you give specific examples. If you can give examples of things that you're doing, it shows that actually you do know these things, and it's much more impressive. So you say things like spreadsheet creation, filtering data, using formulae, VLOOKUP, and analyzing data with pivot tables. If you memorize that and say that list, and you can actually explain all those things, it's really impressive. You're showing off your knowledge. Just instead of just saying, I can use Excel, I'm good at it, you're saying, I can do these things in Excel, which are exactly the skills that a billing specialist may need to have. Then to make your answer even stronger, let's think about how you're going to evidence it. Prove that you've definitely got this. So you've got two options. Option A is, as evidence of these skills, I've completed a course or study. You may show a certificate. You may talk about learning that you've done or a CPD course or something that backs that up. If you don't have that, but you've got experience of using it, what you do is you say, I've developed strong Excel skills in my previous roles and I've used Excel to do whatever. So say what you've actually done with it and talk about the roles where you've used it. And by doing this, you can ace these questions. If you're asked about billing software and you've used billing software, say that you're confident in using it and list the functions that you've used and give examples of the times when you've used it in your job, and you can ace those questions. The next question to be prepared for is, what would you do if a customer refused to pay a bill? And what they want here is for you to stick to the law, stick to policies. They don't want you making up your own policies. They don't want you saying, I would do what I did in my last job because maybe this company works differently. You've got to say that you're going to do the right thing. So the first thing you always do is you emphasize the importance of collections. So if someone's refusing to pay a bill, that is a problem. If everyone refused to pay their bills, the company would go bust and would completely collapse and would be insolvent and go to liquidation. It is extremely important that bills are collected because the company needs that to pay its employees, to function, and to just stay in business. It is very important. So be clear of the importance of someone paying their bill, because you're in billing. It's your job to ensure that the bills are correct, that they're sent out, and potentially you may have some involvement in collections. The next thing you say is you ensure that you understand the customer's situation. Before you go in guns blazing and have a fight with the customer, that's not a good idea. You need to understand what the situation is, because that data is really useful and that's going to inform what steps are taken next. You have to understand the customer before you can decide what to do. Because if the customer is just refusing to pay, or if the customer can't pay but is completely insolvent and the company's collapsed and going into liquidation, that's one thing. If it's a case where the customer is just saying, I'm not paying for no reason, they're just refusing, but they could pay, that's a very different situation. So you've got to understand what the situation of the customer is in. And then with that knowledge, you would then follow the appropriate collections policy. And don't say, I would do this thing. Give a range of possibilities, because you don't know what the company's policies are. You don't know what the practices are. So you can give a range of things that could be the outcome. So it could be that there's a payment plan. It could be that the customer is refusing to pay it because the bill is wrong. And then you have to correct the error before they're going to pay. If you send out a bill that's got something that's wrong on it or is different to the quote that the client has received, then it's understandable they're not going to pay the wrong amount. So you need to get that checked. There may be a dispute, so that dispute would have to be resolved before perhaps the bill was going to be paid. You could move to a formal demand, or in other cases, it may need to go to debt recovery, go to collections, and then the appropriate action, potentially legal action, is taken to recover the debt. So don't tell them exactly, because you don't know enough. They've just said someone's refused. You need to know more, so give them a range of possible answers, and that's how you cover all of the possibilities and how you ace this question. Before we finish, here are some questions that you could ask at the end of a billing specialist interview. If at the end of the interview they say, do you have any questions for us? And you say, no, that's very bad. Make sure you've got some questions. So I'll give you some suggestions. You can think up some of your own, and make sure you've got at least 2 to 3 questions prepared, ready, and memorized. So one question you could say is, I'm very interested in this billing specialist role with your company. Therefore, I would like to know the next steps in your recruitment process. You probably do want to know this anyway, so ask about them. You could say, can you tell me more about the team you have here and how this role fits within your organization? It's a good question, and it'll help you understand the role and who you're working with and what exactly you're going to be doing. You could say, could you recommend any professional learning I could do now to maximize my effectiveness at this role and ensure I would be well prepared for starting if successful? And if they say, for example, you need to read up on this software or learn about this or read this, then you can make a commitment to doing that. And that shows you that you are someone who cares about being well prepared. Another question you could say is, what in your experience are the characteristics of highly effective billing specialists? Find out what they are really looking for, and then you can show, again, how your skills and experience match up with what they are actually looking for in their ideal hire. And the last thing you do is you offer warm and sincere thanks for the interviewer's time interviewing you, and you end on a positive note. And the other thing you make sure is you don't try and negotiate your pay at the end of the interview. That's very negative, and you only want to start negotiating pay after they've offered you the job. You don't want to give them reasons not to offer you the job or question whether you're really great if you're actually asking for lower pay. You want to avoid asking about transfers, so saying, could I move to a different location? No, they're hiring at this location. And don't try and arrange time off or delaying your start date at your interview. That's a really negative thing to do and could lose you the job. So I hope this video was helpful to you. I wish you the best of luck in your billing specialist interview. Please like and subscribe below if it was useful. And finally, thank you very much for watching.